Welcome to Workplace Psychology with Dr. Martha Greidick. I'm Dr. Martha Greidick. This podcast examines a wide variety of work-related issues through the lens of industrial and organizational psychology. And while many of the topics discussed here may be seen as intended for white-collar employees and their employers, in reality, the ideas presented here are applicable across organizations and industries. Additionally, many of the topics discussed here may be applicable outside of the workplace. I encourage you to examine what's presented here, apply what makes sense to you, and simply discard the rest. We live in a fast-paced world, a world that is filled with information and screens from which to consume this information or through which to consume this information. More often than not, we are staring at a screen of some sort, be that at work or outside of work in our personal lives. We look at screens in terms of computer screens or tablets or phones. Even many of our cars have screens for us to look at. And the effects of looking at screens are not new information for us. It's sort of old news. We know that there are certain effects of being exposed to the light that is emitted from screens. Many people, as a result, wear glasses that block blue light, which is light that is emitted from screens. And wearing such glasses can alleviate some of the symptoms that have been associated with looking at screens for too many hours in a day. However, there's much more to it than just protecting ourselves from blue light. Looking at screens throughout most of our day, or nearly half of our day, can be detrimental in so many ways. Not only is it tiring for our eyes, it's tiring for our minds. We are designed to flex our eyes, to test our vision by switching from things that are near us to things that are far away from us and everything else in between. We are designed to be mobile, to move around, to look around, and to switch up our experience. But because we live in this digital world, in a fast-paced world where screens are so prevalent, we have really changed our daily experience to include screens to the degree where biologically and psychologically we aren't necessarily ready for. Digital fatigue can manifest itself in many different ways, from insomnia to headaches to an inability to concentrate, to just feeling tired, or maybe having your eyes be tired or heavy, unable to focus your eyes on whatever you're looking at, whether you're looking at something on a digital screen or off of a screen, something that is non-digital, maybe trying to read a book or a label or focus on something that is no longer a screen. There are so many reasons why we want to address digital fatigue beyond just the obvious of being physically, psychologically, and emotionally tired of looking at screens. Those in themselves can be difficult to deal with and can lead to all kinds of symptoms, if you will. But when left unaddressed, simple digital fatigue can turn into burnout, where a person simply cannot stand interacting with a screen anymore. And if your job requires that you have screen exposure, that can be very difficult. And even if your job doesn't require much screen exposure, chances are you are experiencing some kind of screen interaction outside of your professional life or outside of work. So that means that it's in everybody's best interest to pay attention to screen exposure and digital fatigue and address it so that it does not turn into digital burnout. Many of us engage in things such as video conferencing calls. Zoom or other platforms make that so easy for us, and that has become a norm for many, especially during the pandemic when we were isolating ourselves from one another and minimizing exposure to other people. This way of communicating and getting together with others has become a very prevalent way of experiencing each other's presence. And even though the pandemic is over, many people continue to use this modality of communicating with one another. So we continue to be exposed to screens by using video conferencing as one of our many ways of communicating. The reality of the world in which we live means that we will probably continue to be exposed to screens and to look at screens. But since digital fatigue and inevitably digital burnout are a real concern, we really have the responsibility to ourselves and to those in our lives that we care about, so your family, your children, to address the exposure to digital experiences, such as looking at screens. And while you may not have too much of a choice of how much you end up looking at a screen while you're at work, outside of work could be a whole different experience. There used to be a time when there was very little or no exposure to screens at work, and really the only screens that people were experiencing might be outside of work, such as a television. But today it's quite the opposite. We stare at screens at work all day long, and then we leave work and stare at screens some more. So again, while it may not be too much of an option to change how much screen time you have while you're at work, it is important to remember that your power lies beyond your work environment, in your personal life. So as an individual, strive to adjust your work experience as much as you can to reduce your screen time. If that's an option, then it's one that I recommend you explore. Make sure that even if that option is minimal for you at work, take breaks away from your screens, from your computer, from whatever other screens that you are looking at while at work. Give your eyes a break. Stand up, give your body a break. Walk away from your workstation and look away from the screen. Focus on something that's far away to give your eyes an opportunity to get some exercise from focusing at the same distance all the time when you're looking at your screen to focusing at different distances, because that's what we were designed to do. And once you are outside of work, it's really up to you how you're going to manage your screen time and how much you are willing and able to reduce your time of looking at the screen outside of work. One could look at it this way. You may have less of a choice in terms of screen exposure at work, but ideally, you have more control over what you're looking at outside of work, which is where your power lies. And if you're an employer, it's absolutely critical that you encourage your employees to take screen breaks, meaning encourage, be proactive in terms of what you promote to your employees, to your workforce, what you demonstrate to your employees, to your workforce through your own behaviors. Healthy options so that people are not encouraged and even worse, rewarded for staring at their computer screens or whatever other screens that they're interacting with without regular breaks. Even if a person's job requires that they spend most of their day or a large part of their day staring at a screen, it is important that they are encouraged to take breaks, screen breaks, so that they rest their eyes, they move away from the screen, they stand up, and they take breaks. What people do during their personal time, whether that's during breaks in terms of work or their lives outside of work, is really up to them. And as an employer, there's little or maybe not even much of anything that you can do. But an organization absolutely has the ability and the responsibility to promote and encourage healthy behaviors, and limiting screen time by encouraging breaks from screen time is one of the things that an employer can do. This is so critical. If we combine the efforts of individuals looking out for themselves in terms of their own workplace experience and the screen time exposure, and the efforts of an organization that promotes healthy behaviors and promotes breaks from screen time, then we have the best chance of success of reducing screen fatigue. On the flip side of that coin, if neither the individual takes the responsibility for their screen time and the organization isn't proactive in promoting healthy behavior, and even worse, if an organization encourages or rewards working throughout the day without taking breaks from the screen, then screen fatigue is inevitably going to become screen burnout. And as you know from previous podcasts, burnout is something that we certainly don't want for ourselves as individuals and for our employees within the workforce. The topic of digital fatigue may not seem like something that is discussed very often, and many of you listening may not even have heard that term or given it much thought. But it's real. It's part of our reality of today's day and age, and it's something that needs to be addressed. The solution is fairly simple in the lack of its complexity. The key is to be proactive and to do something about it. As this episode comes to an end, let's review what was discussed. Digital fatigue is a real thing that's becoming more and more prevalent for us in our fast-paced, technologically inspired, and technologically driven society. When left unaddressed, digital fatigue can quickly turn into digital burnout, and burnout of any kind is not good for us, whether we're looking at it from an individual point of view or from a collective view of a workforce within an organization. Each side has a responsibility of addressing digital fatigue and taking proactive steps to minimize it by reducing screen time for individuals at work. And of course, every person has the extended responsibility of addressing the same thing in their personal lives outside of the workplace. Collectively, we have the best chance of reducing screen fatigue if we put our efforts together, meaning individuals and organizations or employers. And while for many, the reality of work means looking at a screen, it's not as bleak as it may seem when you consider what you can do in order to take regular breaks, to give your eyes a break, to give your body a break. So there is definite hope, and we all have the responsibility to address digital fatigue in order to reduce its effects. as the week unfolds, I invite you to give some consideration to the idea of digital fatigue. Where are you individually in terms of how much screen experience or how much screen exposure you have every day? Does your work require that you look at a screen for 8 hours a day or the vast majority of your day? And what are you doing in order to cut down on that, or at least to take breaks on a regular basis so that you're allowing your eyes, your body, your mind to rest away from a screen of any kind? And remember that taking a break from your computer screen at work should not include looking at your phone and checking social media. You're just switching screens. So that's not a break at all. If you're an employer, first and foremost, how are you encouraging, or are you encouraging healthy behaviors within your employees, within the workforce? Are you encouraging people to take screen breaks on a regular basis? Or are you inadvertently promoting the continued interaction between an individual and the screen at work? So you may be guilty of promoting the more unhealthy behaviors in the workplace experience for your employees. So it's very important. I encourage you as an employer to take a look at what your organization does. And if you are in a leadership position, are you encouraging healthy behaviors from your employees? And are you being a good example? Are you promoting healthy behaviors from your employees? So as the week unfolds, those are the kinds of things that I invite everybody to consider, whether you're an employee, whether you are an employer, whether you're in a management position or not. Everybody has something to think about, because as I already said repeatedly, left unattended, digital fatigue will turn into digital burnout. For those of you who are experiencing this podcast in an audio-only version, I encourage you to check out my YouTube channel, where you can find the podcast in a digital version. In addition to the podcast, you can also find other videos on my YouTube channel. Those videos focus on stress management. The link for my YouTube channel is in the description below, so I encourage you to check that out. Thank you for joining me today. Please subscribe to this podcast. I look forward to seeing you here again next time. Until then, I wish you joy and well-being.